Hi, everyone. Welcome to Chapter 2 of the Influence series. My name is Kate Motaung from 5 Minute Friday, and today I'm here with Alia Joy Hagenbach. And I did not ask you how to pronounce your name, so I probably just slaughtered it.
It's fine.
How do you say your last name?
Hagenbach
Oh,
or
I was pretty
Hagenbach.
close.
Like they say it differently.
Hagenbach.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, Alia, thank you so much for being here today.
thanks.
I'm glad to be able to chat with you. For those who are listening, we'll be discussing Chapter 2 of the book Influence, Building a Platform that Elevates Jesus, Not Me. And as I mentioned, this is week 2 or session 2 of a 12-part series. So if you'd like to catch the other videos and interviews in this series, you can find those at 5minutefriday.com/influence series. Alia, before we get started, could you tell listeners a bit about yourself and your work?
So I have been blogging for about 6 years, but I've always written for as long as I can remember, mostly in journals, like boxes in the garage that I will have to have somebody burn if I ever die, giant bonfire, get rid of all the evidence. I am married for 20 years. This last year was 20 years, and we have 3 kids. So I stay at home and I write. That's what I
And
do.
this is a big year for you. Can you tell us what's
Yeah,
happening?
I have a book launching in April 2nd. So it's coming up really fast. We're right in the middle of all the launch stuff getting started, and yeah.
Yes, I know. I'm so looking forward to this book. Can you tell listeners the title and the release date?
Yeah, so it's called Glorious Weakness, Discovering God in All We Lack. And it's very, very heavily memoir based, but it's an exploration of what it means to be poor in spirit, how our weaknesses are a place where God meets us. And it goes through a lot of issues with mental illness and poverty, and just kind of talking about those areas that would look to the world like deficiencies or are deficiencies. But the gift in them, how God meets us in that. So, yeah.
It is the one book that I'm so looking forward to this year. I can't wait till. For those who haven't ever read Alia's work, I highly encourage you to check out her blog and other places that she writes, and definitely pick up a copy of her book when it comes out in April, because your writing is so beautiful, just breathtakingly beautiful. Alia, in your interactions with other Christian writers over the years, what would you say are some of the common fears that Christian writers face regarding writing and platform building?
I think it depends a lot on personality types. I think some writers are really, really focused on numbers, and I think that there's this sort of fear that until you've reached this elusive number, you're not legit. I think for other people who have reached those numbers, or that level of success, whether it's numbers or a book deal or whatever, there's a feeling of, I've attained this sort of holy grail of like publishing. I got my book contract or something. And then I think in that sense, sometimes we get the fear that that imposter syndrome, that, I've got this thing, but like, I don't know how I got this thing, or why are people actually reading me? I think it's the double-edged sword of like, no, what if nobody reads me? And then the second thing is like, what if everybody reads me? And they're both terrifying. And then I think, just with platform building, with social media, there's so much that goes into it. Time and identity, and how much it can suck the sort of joy out of the thing when you feel like you're, so I think that can be a fear, that if I give over to this sort of machine, it will gobble me up, or, but I mean, I think there's a lot of things that surround platform building that are kind of iffy. And then I think a big one that I've faced a lot is like, it feels icky to be like, it feels like self-promotion, and there's a part of you that has to reckon with, like, is this self-serving? Is this really serving God? Am I just like, doing all this stuff for me? Am I building my own little kingdom? So I think that can be a big check too sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's a lot of what my co-author Shannon Popkin and I are addressing in the book Influence. Is just, there's so much wrapped up in it, and like you said, it's so easy to maybe start out with one motive and one intention and goal, thinking, I'm going to do this as a way of using my gifts to serve the Lord, and then soon we're serving ourselves and trying to build a name for ourselves. That's so true. So you mentioned some of these fears. From your observations of reading people online and interacting with people, what often happens when writers do succumb to some of those fears? Like, how are their writing lives affected as a result of fear?
So you're talking about fear with platform building or just in general?
Even in general, like fears related to writing, like the ones you've mentioned already.
Um, I think some of the things that I've seen are fear as a motivator to end up very striving, very insecure. I think it's easy for, especially in the writing world, for there to be this idea, this sort of pervasive feeling of scarcity that we're somehow going to miss out on something if we're not on all the time, if we're not posting all the time, if we're not producing. And I think that can make the work really kind of poor. I've seen that sometimes in the people trying to get their message out there and get seen and get noticed. The quality of their message really goes down. And I think sometimes people focus so much on the success that they forget about the substance. They're not really putting out a message that has taken any time for God to actually like nurture and for it to be real and for it to be true. And so I've seen that happen. I've also seen the temptation, I think a lot, I think all of us face this, but this sort of temptation to curate your identity as a writer, and it can lead to sort of being this false self. You know, you're not the same person behind the screen that you are on screen. You know, and so I think those are matters of integrity that can come up. And I think the underlying thing with all of those things is really less success and more fear. It's how do I make a name for myself? How do I make an identity for myself? How do I, and like I said, I think all of those things drive poor work. So
I think that's huge, particularly when we're in this era where we can post instantly, right? We don't have to wait for anything if we don't want to. And so that can be a huge issue and temptation. Yeah. What do you do personally to overcome some of the fears that whisper in your ear?
I think probably the number one thing is having people in my real life who are involved in my real life who really know me, like 100% know me and can call me on my, stuff. And I always want to be the same person. Like, I don't want anybody from my life to read my blog and be like, I don't know who that person is, or, and so I think that having that grounding in real life is really important, in your church, in your family, in your neighborhood, in your community, with your friends. I think, I think the first thing is to be a real person, to have an identity, to have a, and that is just very grounding. I think the other thing for me, probably the biggest thing that I'm focusing on, that I focus on is just the idea of being beloved, this idea that there isn't anything that I can write that is going to impress God. And there isn't anything that I could write that's going to, damage my relationship with him in the sense of how much he loves me or how much he cares about me or how much he's going to use me. And I think in that sense, there's just sort of this freedom in being able to do our best work. So for me, I know I struggle with imposter syndrome a lot. I remember going to Festival of Faith and Writing and thinking like, I'm going to be there with all these like legit writers. And, I remember sitting at a table one night and it was like, everybody around me was like, they had their MDiv and they had their MFA and everybody had all this stuff. And I'm like, I write my feelings on the internet, just like, which of these things is not like the other? But it's those feelings that come up where you think, what am I doing in this space? Or the feeling like you're going to miss out on something if you're not, trying to be there. And I think, going into that conference, I had gone to a pre-conference and they had really focused on just like prayer and spending time with the Lord. And so I went into that conference with this very solid foundation of I would literally be walking around Festival of Faith and Writing and being like, I am beloved. I am beloved, just that message. But it helped because I think, there's nothing that God intends for me that I'm going to miss out on. And I think just realizing that I'm not going to miss something that he has for me. And so I don't have to strive. I can rest in that. And I think that takes away a lot of the fear about performance, a lot of the fear about identity. Am I good enough? Can I do this thing? Because if God intends for me to do it, as long as I'm faithful, it will be done, and it'll be done in whatever measure he decides, so I think that's freeing for me. That's
Absolutely.
probably the thing that grounds me the most, is just realizing, like, this is all extraneous stuff that I'm doing. Writing has been a huge gift and I appreciate it and I love it, but it doesn't change my actual identity.
Yeah.
It doesn't change who I am. So
Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. That's very encouraging. I hope that those who are listening are taking it to heart too, because I think these are issues that so many people struggle with and we don't talk about it often enough. So I
yeah.
appreciate you sharing that. So, I mean, you've mentioned some really helpful things already. Is there any other advice that you would want to give to writers who want to write or maybe build a platform, but those fears are really holding them back from doing so?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's good. I think there's a healthy measure of interrogating our intentions. I think there's a healthy place to be in communication with God. I mean, he's not, he wants us to serve him and he wants us to serve him faithfully. And if he's given us a message, then we hold that, we steward that. I think we can do that well. Um, but I also think that there's a certain measure of fear that is always present. I still write scared all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when it's, sort of stifling fear where you're insecure and it's dealing with issues of identity, it's dealing with issues of God's goodness and his provision and scarcity, or it's dealing with, those kind of things. I think those are areas that we have to deal with. But in terms of like, it's a vulnerable thing to write and put your words out there. It always will be. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think there's a level of doing it scared anyway. And I think where the freedom comes in with that is you have to trust, like, you have to really get to the place where you can trust God with the results of your work. I think I see a lot of people focusing so much on platform because they're looking at the long, I need to have the numbers, I need to have the email list, I need to have the social media following and the page views and all of these things. And I really think if people focus, quite a bit on the craft of writing, on the message, on who they are as a person, their character, I think that will come through in their work.
Mm-hmm.
And what they have will be substance, even if they're not successful in the sense of, kind of what we see as successful. What the product that they'll have is going to be something of substance that will last.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. Like, we want work that's going to last, that's going to impact people. We want work that's not just, slapped together and thrown out there so that we can have more page views. And I think stewarding that platform means sometimes doing it scared anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I think the big things are, be generous. I think, I've seen that a lot in the writers community, just so many generous people sharing each other's work and being part of that, being kind, and kind doesn't always mean that there won't be any tension or there won't be any, doesn't mean being a doormat, but I think we can always focus on being kind, being humble, having integrity. I think all of those things that are character things should really come out when we're focusing on, I mean, it's not separate. It should come out when we're thinking about platform and all of those things.
Yeah.
And I think those things really pay off in terms of platform building. For me, I don't have huge numbers or anything, but I feel like I have a really strong community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that is just like being a human, like be a good human, be a good person and be kind and be generous and, don't be a jerk online. And I think that those things pay off. So.
Absolutely. Well, I definitely appreciate that about you and the way that you have made an effort to, well, the way you write, it makes it seem very effortless, actually. That it's beautiful all the time, but I know that you put a lot of work into it, and I just appreciate that. Like you mentioned, the substance and working on the craft, and that's something that I so admire about your writing and your character that goes along with it. It's like the whole
Thank you.
package. So I really appreciate that. Well, thank you so much again for
Yeah,
your
thanks
time.
for
This has
having
been
me.
really encouraging to me. Can you tell people where they can find you online?
So I am at aliajoy.com. That's my blog, although it's kind of dusty and old. I have a Patheos column called The Fluency of Hope. So it's patheos.com/the Fluency of Hope. And that's my more recent stuff. And then I contribute to Encourage. So I'm there. I'm a monthly contributor there. I am trying to work on like a master place to kind of send people out because I'm kind of spread all over the place. I have written for a lot of other places, and I'll probably pick up writing for other sites when I after this book. Right now, the book takes up everything. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's where I'm at for right now.
Great. Well, we'll be sure to link to those in the post that's associated with this interview. So
Thanks.
for those listening again, if you'd like to catch more interviews in this series, you can head over to 5minutefriday.com/influence series. And this has been chapter 2 of Influence, Building a Platform that Elevates Jesus, Not Me. Alia, thanks so much again for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.